The brave soldier once eliminated 3 enemy combatants with his bare hands. To his later colleagues at work, he was simply a tall man who liked to read during breaks, occasionally puffing on a cigar in the hallway. But to those who had fought beside him on the battlefield, he was the embodiment of absolute courage, a man who once used sheer physical strength to knock out 2 Chinese soldiers by smashing their heads together during hand-to-hand combat. This is the journey of David Bleak, one of the most highly decorated soldiers in U.S. history, awarded the Medal of Honor, and remembered for one of the most unbelievable acts of heroism ever witnessed in the American military. Born on February 27, 1932, Bleak grew up in a remote rural area of Idaho, in a devout Mormon family. Standing 6 feet 5 inches tall, 1.96 meters, and weighing around 250 pounds, 113 kilograms. His massive frame made him stand out even among America's biggest men. Though he only attended high school briefly before dropping out, Bleak chose a life of cattle ranching like many other young men in the countryside. But deep down, he always believed he was meant for something more than the quiet life of open pastures. A longing to explore the greater world pushed him to enlist in the United States Army on November 1, 1950. Bleak was quickly sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, for basic training, and afterward assigned to a medical unit attached to the 223rd Infantry Regiment, part of the 40th Infantry Division of the U.S. Army. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, his unit was ordered into action. After completing intensive medical training, Bleak deployed to the Korean Peninsula in early 1952, a place where gunfire and explosions never ceased. During his service, Bleak was promoted to sergeant. His platoon was tasked with defending a rugged mountainous area near Minari Gaul, right alongside the 38th parallel, the heavily contested border between North and South Korea. At the time, the war had settled into a grueling stalemate, marked by small-scale but ferocious engagements. The scenes of trench warfare, static fighting, and bloody battles over every inch of land bore a haunting resemblance to World War I. In the early morning hours of June 14, 1952, at exactly 4:30 a.m., Bleak joined a 20-man reconnaissance team on a mission to infiltrate Chinese-controlled territory, China being North Korea's primary ally, aimed at assessing the possibility of a large-scale enemy offensive. The terrain they faced was treacherous, low brush, jagged hills, and shallow depressions that offered poor visibility and made them vulnerable to ambush. To support the mission, another American unit launched a diversionary assault from a different direction to draw enemy attention. However, the plan did not unfold as hoped. As Bleak's team reached the hillside, they were met with intense enemy fire from heavy weapons. Without hesitation, Bleak, positioned at the rear of the formation, rushed forward to where several teammates had been hit. He quickly bandaged wounds, stopped the bleeding, and stabilized their conditions before pressing on with the rest of the unit toward the hilltop, where an even fiercer battle awaited. In the tense moment when the gun smoke had yet to clear, David Bleak suddenly witnessed an American soldier being shot right in front of him. Without a moment's hesitation, he charged straight toward the enemy trench, where Chinese soldiers were unleashing a barrage of gunfire on his comrades. One Chinese soldier rushed at him, but before he could strike, Bleak had already seized him. The two wrestled fiercely on the ground, and in a matter of seconds, Bleak locked his hands around the enemy's neck and crushed a vertebra with sheer brute force. Barely back on his feet and still catching his breath, another enemy soldier came charging in from a blind spot. Relying on instincts honed in battle, Bleak reached out, grabbed the soldier by the throat, and with a surge of raw power, crushed his windpipe completely, like an apple crushed by a steel grip. Before the second enemy even hit the ground, a third came at him, eyes blazing with rage, screaming furiously. The soldier lunged at the giant with his rifle. Without flinching, Bleak pulled a combat knife from his belt and drove it into the enemy's chest. Dropping him instantly, 3 enemies were taken down in a matter of minutes. But Bleak didn't stop to savor his victory. He immediately turned back to the more important task at hand, treating the severely wounded comrades who were still under fire. As he knelt beside one badly wounded soldier, a grenade hurled from enemy lines struck the helmet of another American and dropped to the ground. Without thinking, Bleak shoved the soldier out of harm's way and threw his massive body over him like a human shield. Miraculously, both men emerged unscathed from the explosion. Still dazed by the blast's impact, Bleak remained focused and continued administering first aid to the other wounded, even as the entire platoon was retreating in chaos toward the base of the hill. While assisting the injured, he discovered 3 more American soldiers had been hit by gunfire from a well-camouflaged enemy machine gun. For most, one act of heroism would have been enough to earn the Medal of Honor, but Bleak wasn't finished yet. Ignoring the bullets whizzing past him, he pushed forward toward the wounded. While administering aid, he was struck by a bullet in the leg. Blood flowed from the wound, but Bleak calmly dressed it himself, then returned to help 2 more American soldiers lying in pain on the ground. When he reached the third man, who was so badly injured he couldn't move, Bleak lifted him onto his shoulders and dragged him through a hail of bullets to safety. But the ordeal wasn't over yet. From behind a boulder, 2 Chinese soldiers with bayonets suddenly charged forward. Bleak gently laid his wounded comrade on the ground and prepared for battle. Despite his large frame, he displayed a surprising agility that caught the enemy off guard. Bleak dodged their thrusts, grabbed both soldiers by the head, and smashed them together. The brutal collision dropped them instantly, neither having time to cry out. Tossing their bodies aside, Bleak hoisted the injured soldier back onto his shoulder and continued his march toward safety. As if he had never been wounded, never felt fatigue. After that fierce firefight, something miraculous happened. All 20 men on the patrol returned safely to base. Not only that, they had also captured several enemy troops, although about a third of the soldiers had sustained injuries from bullets or shrapnel. Thanks to the bravery and extraordinary efforts of David Bleak, not a single life was lost on the battlefield. Though he himself suffered nerve damage in his leg, Bleak regarded it as a minor wound compared to what could have happened. Not long after the fateful battle on June 14, he was honorably discharged, marking the end of a glorious chapter in his military career. Still, David wasn't ready to return home just yet. He volunteered to continue serving overseas and was assigned to Japan. It was during his time there that he learned he had been nominated for the most prestigious award in the U.S. military, the Medal of Honor. On October 27, 1953, at the White House, President Dwight D. Eisenhower personally pinned the medal to Bleak's chest in a solemn ceremony. Despite the formal atmosphere, there was still room for a bit of humor. The president reportedly joked, "Your neck's so big I thought I was pinning this medal onto a telephone pole." Though he was now a national hero, David Bleak never used his fame for personal gain. After returning to Idaho, he didn't seek jobs based on his title or recognition. He started fresh, like any other working-class man. He drove trucks for a while, then took a job as a butcher in a local shop. That's where he met Lois, the woman who would become his wife and the mother of their 4 children. The family settled in the town of Shelley, Idaho. Bleak eventually took a custodial job at the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory, a position that might seem far too ordinary for someone who had earned the Medal of Honor. But for Bleak, it was a life worth living. According to his family, friends, and co-workers, David Bleak always carried himself with humility, lived simply, and almost never spoke of his wartime heroics. When asked, his wife once said, he genuinely didn't understand why people thought he was special. To him, what he did was just what anyone would have done in that situation. The only difference was, he was twice as strong as the rest of them. Though he always preferred to live quietly, there were still small reminders that David was no ordinary man. A friend once recalled an instance when Bleak was invited back to the White House for a formal event but was denied leave by his boss due to a work obligation. He said nothing in protest, showed no sign of disappointment, just like the man he had always been: modest, dedicated, and quietly extraordinary. Not long after the invitation from the White House was sent out, a special directive was delivered to the senior management of the laboratory where David Bleak worked. The message was clear: he would attend the recognition event, whether his supervisors approved or not. At that moment, Bleak's honor was no longer a personal matter, but one of national importance. Just as he had done during his military service, Bleak never relied on handouts or special favors from anyone. Through sheer effort, diligence, and a relentless desire to learn, He gradually proved himself in his civilian career. Starting as a humble laborer, he steadily rose through the ranks, eventually becoming one of the key personnel at one of the nation's most critical research facilities. By the time he approached retirement in the mid-1990s, David had taken on a highly responsible role, chief technician overseeing the handling of spent nuclear fuel, an extremely demanding position requiring deep technical knowledge and absolute precision. He was directly responsible for ensuring the safe disposal of radioactive fuel rods, playing a crucial role in protecting both people and the environment. David Bleak's life came to a close on March 23, 2006. He left behind not just a legacy of valor, but an enduring example of humble, sincere living. His family, 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren, carried on his memory with deep pride in the man who had been their father and grandfather. With his extraordinary heroism and the highest honor the U.S. military can bestow, the Medal of Honor, Bleak was fully entitled to be laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, the final resting place of the nation's most revered heroes and contributors. But he never sought such grandeur. A man who lived for simplicity, Bleak chose a different path in death. He didn't want a statue or a grand headstone. Instead, he requested to be cremated, and for his ashes to be scattered across the familiar fields of Idaho, a land that had witnessed his journey of honesty, humility, and integrity from the very beginning until the very end.